welcome to the League of Extraordinary Atheists for Humanism, where we attempt to apply logic and reason to religion and politics. I'm here with my wonderful, beautiful co-host, Christy Santiago.
Hi guys, that's me. Happy Friday. That's about it. Ready to go. We have so much tonight to bring to you guys. I'm glad you guys are here. Lots of things that are important, I think. I think we only cover important things, but we are silly about it, which is fun. But we have a lot happened. A lot is happening in the world, and I'm excited to bring you tonight's presentation, and excited to hear Matt put together something. So
a little bit of something.
I mean, just a little bit of something. Oh, dangerous.
Everybody say Darkwing Duck. Let's get dangerous. All right. That said. All right. So it's getting hot in here. Named because I heard about the story, or the story of Siberia right now. So the first thing that pops up in Google here, I thought it was the best summary. So I go ahead and take this. This was June 22nd when this was reported. One of the coldest places on Earth became one of the warmest. A heat wave in Russia on Saturday, whichever Saturday was closest to June 22nd, sent temperatures in the Siberian town of I said this earlier. Verkhovyansk. Yeah. Sorry, Russia. There goes my poop money. Soaring to 38 degrees Celsius or 104 Fahrenheit. Meteorologists say that would be the highest number ever recorded north of the Arctic Circle, which is a pretty big deal. Yeah, I mean, ever to the point of where we've tracked it with satellites. That's satellites tracking.
We were smart enough to understand that we could keep a record of things. Yeah,
it's the hottest
since then
by a lot. And this, of course, is only bad news because it's melting permafrost. When it melts permafrost, that means it's releasing carbon monoxide, which
its name is permafrost.
It's supposed to stay permanently frost.
Right.
And yeah, so and then as we've mentioned it in the show before, monoxide heats the atmosphere 20 times more efficiently than carbon dioxide. So that's really not good for global warming of things, right? That's really bad because we don't want that. So going into it a little bit more, I wanted to try to read a couple of different paragraphs from a couple of different sources, just kind of covering the story. The headline from this came from July 6th, so like 2 weeks after that June 22nd, like little headline that I just gave you guys. The headline here is a heat wave thawed Siberia's tundra. Now it's on fire. So going on. For months, Siberia has been experiencing extreme heat due to a combination of persistent sunny weather and human-caused climate change. In addition to producing Arctic temperatures that cracked 100 degrees in June, the heat has fueled, yes.
Hold. For our non-American viewers, 100 is like 40 Celsius. I think I'm correct. Maybe not. Chuck can put that.
About 38.
About 38. Yeah, so almost 40. So just so that everybody understands, because a lot of times I have many friends I talk to on a regular basis, and when I tell them it feels like it's 100, they're like, are you not dead? Because they're on the Celsius, and 100 Celsius would just not be acceptable living. So yes, 38. That's what he is talking about, which in Siberia is not ever supposed to happen. It's supposed to be perma cold.
Yeah, it's supposed to be. I mean, it's called a tundra. The tundra's on fire because it's so sunny, it's so hot. The heat has fueled an enormous outbreak of wildfires, including fires on tundra underpinned by permafrost. Normally frigid soil likely that is likely becoming even less frozen this year. Wow. I have a graphic. It's from NASA. So actually, maybe I'll see if I can share it. If it's okay, Nacha, if you can let me share the graphic, let me know. I'll keep reading for now, though. But I can't do it by just pushing the button right now. It's disabled by host. This rash of fires on landscape that are typically too cold, wet, and icy to burn is raising alarms for ecologists and climate scientists who fear it's yet another sign that the Arctic is undergoing rapid changes that could tip off a cascade of consequences, both local and global. Yep, nope, I'll read this paragraph too. If fire becomes a regular occurrence on Siberia's thawing tundra, it could dramatically reshape entire ecosystems, causing new species to take over and perhaps priming the land for more fires. The blazes themselves could also exacerbate global warming by burning deep into the soil and releasing carbon that was accumulated as frozen organic matter over hundreds of years. So I want to stop here and talk a little bit about the why this is such a big deal on so many levels. Because the first one, if you care anything about climate science, you already know the part that I've talked about with the carbon monoxide. That's already a big deal. This is so closely related to one of our biggest catastrophes happening currently all over the world, COVID-19, because it is extremely likely that this virus started because this I forget what the term is, but this is a virus that was passed from an animal to humans. We're still animals, but one species to another kind of thing, very different species, and that doesn't happen with every disease, right? So that happens partly because when we invade other species' habitats and destroy their habitats, they have no choice but to find a new habitat. And this is what happened with COVID-19. There's been a lot of research going into this, and we've only mentioned it a few times on this show, but it's really believed right now that the bats that probably passed this on to humans, we destroyed their habitat. That's happened with multiple viruses and bacteria that we've picked up from other species. It's because we invade their habitats. And the more we do that, it's like when you go to another country and you need to get vaccinated first so you don't catch what they have. Other different areas and different communities and different species in those areas have different diseases. This is what killed a lot of Native Americans. Like, this isn't rocket science. This isn't just like conspiracy theory. This is common knowledge that needs to be brought up now because it's important right now because so many people don't understand what's happening. When you cross species like that and like wildlife, you destroy habitats and you have to bring habitats together because of that, because we didn't just genocide species that were kicking out of their homes. Well, then they live and they pass whatever they have on to us. This is just a thing. Okay, I beat this horse dead. I hope you understand now. This happens on a global warming like front as well, right? If we continue not addressing climate change in the right way, multiple things will happen. And I'm just going to piggyback what I was talking about first, and then I'm going to build on it. Make sure we're still going. I see Natcha's thing. All right, we're still okay. We're good. I'm sorry. Anyways, where was I? Sorry, guys. So, just like here, we're worried that this is going to reshape ecosystems, whole habitats of different species, just in Siberia, right? Siberia is not the only place we're having wildfires, right? We're having them in California, we've had them in Australia, and this moves other species to new areas. And a lot of times those new areas that they have to go are where we're at, right? And then we want to kill them because they're invading their space, because no species likes another species invading their space, right? Unless invited, like pets, especially real cute cats, right? But point being, our actions, whether we're invading personally, directly into another species or just an entire different ecosystem, our actions that cause the climate to be more drastic harms coastal cities, indigenous peoples all around the globe, and just other species way more than it affects us with how we live, especially if you're away from coastal cities. And there's so much population that doesn't think about it because we're so inland, and it just doesn't hit us as hard. So we don't care, or we don't believe it because we don't see it as much. We don't see the drastic change over the last 20 years even. But it's so important to just step back and talk about climate change. Like, I know the left like to harp on it a lot, but it's because it's so freaking important. And
it's very important. And the specialists that work in these particular fields have dedicated their lives to these particular fields. And we in this community understand the rigors, how rigorous science is. You know, they do all these testings, they test it over and over and over again to get the same result, and then they write it all down, and then they send, that's not complete. Then that gets sent off to scientists the world over so they can peer review it. And if that exact thing you did turns out the same every time for them, now we have something. So we're talking about the experts in this telling us for, I don't know, since the early 70s, late 60s, some even from other countries that have ice caps. And, you know, Norway is one of them. They had been dealing with sea rise. Some of these scientists in the late 50s saying, we're pretty sure that if we don't stop, we're going to have problems. And I even found scientists loosely, early 1900s, late 1800s, different science, I understand. But the best of what we had at the time. At that time, before 1900, they were saying, because the industrial age, and they'd seen certain areas crop up that were very industrial, lots of factories and lots of billowing smoke, and the people that lived there were just filthy. And if it's doing that to the sky and killing the trees around and killing all the living things around and making people sick, well, what is it doing to the environment? Well, scientists were curious, so they tested the environment and they found, oh my, we have way too much of this in the air in these areas that are industrial with black pluming clouds, and less over here. If we keep doing this, or we do this and spread this kind of lifestyle everywhere, we're going to help global warming. It's happened before, but we'll speed it up. It is going to happen again, regardless of us being here. This planet will go up and down, but over billions of years. It was not expected to happen this fast. And I wanted to just kind of, piggyback onto, you're talking about Antarctica.
Or the Arctic Circle.
The Arctic Circle. The Arctic Circle. This year was the highest. I mean, it's been getting colder every single year in Antarctica, where there's a pilgrimage to see the penguins there, which why wouldn't there be? You get to see them in their wild habitat. Penguins are everywhere at the South America's very, very tip. There are amazing things that go on there, crazy, crazy life that goes on there. And they should stay pretty cold. And they've never gone over 20 Celsius, which is 68 Fahrenheit. But that's on record. That became the record on February 13th, 2020. So we have Siberia in the north and Antarctica in the south. Both of our poles, which should be frozen, are melting. And apparently one of them's on fire. I did read an article. I did not have time to fact check it, of a scientist, which there are scientists that pose lots of hypotheses, and then they're checked out. They're and I don't know if this one has been, but it was about the fires that had kind of wildfire spreading in Siberia, that the gas that's in the permafrost that we don't want to let out is actually getting burnt away, and we might not see too much rise from that. It doesn't mean that it's not ruining, the environment.
You said what?
Oh.
It's going to burn what away?
The gases that are in the permafrost that are melting and going into the air. Well, the fire will just eat them up. So in those areas, now, like I said, I didn't get to fact check it. It was an idea from a scientist. There was a link, and I didn't follow it. I wanted to finish the one I was on about actually the Siberian fires. Because I thought, wait, wildfires in Siberia? How does snow catch on fire? But to my surprise, I was ignorant of it. I had to learn. Yeah, there's a lot of things when it comes to global warming that I don't think is even on people's radars. I mean, people that in our community it is. The refugee problem that in many countries, mostly on the conservative alt-right side, the anti-immigrant, what are they going to do when people come from everywhere? It's going to be a mass migration to get away from areas that are uninhabitable. Think about Death Valley in California. People don't live there. They can't. They can visit. There's rules. You have to bring, so much water for your weight per hour that you can't live there. Well, there's going to be more places. Now, who knows the future? Maybe there'll be more places that we can't live now, but there'll be more places that we can live then,
Yeah, we'll just have to go towards the poles and just get away from the equator a little bit.
I mean, we can quote.
It'll balance out. Instead of having poles, we'll just go off center.
Well, that's how Putin sees it, and I can semi-quote him. good. Global warming is good for us. It's not it's not bad for Russia to be able to have more trade. Now, where Russia is located above them, even though there would be water there, it's just ice all the way up. Well, that's melting. So boats can freely go instead of having to go all the way around. They can just port right there. That's for them economically advantageous. That's good. But then he followed it with people will come to Russia for palm trees and a beach. And I look forward to that. And that might be, I mean, he won't be around when that happens, but
right. I mean,
weird.
it's good for his
The
country.
planet's alive, and it's weird to think of it like that. I mean, it's alive.
And what I always say is just like, look, the Earth will be fine, but we're the ones who fucked. So it's fine. If you don't want to do anything about it, the Earth will be fine. Stop listening to those tree hugging leftists. There will still be trees. There will still be Earth.
Yes, there will. And it's not just humans. You know, we're in the 6th mass extinction.
Yeah.
So that's crazy to think about, and to actually look at all that we have lost in just my lifetime, 43 years.
A lot of species.
Yeah.
Crazy. I did a video on that one at one point.
Yeah, like over 40%, a little bit less than 50% of all species that were on the planet have gone extinct because of not being able to live in their old habitats, not being able to evolve, you know, long enough to have offspring that can live in the new environment, and so they die off, and
then they're gone.
And then they're gone. Yeah.
So, yeah, not everyone has a plan for when they're like coastal cities or any kind of habitat gets destroyed by either flooding or extreme heat or just more massive storms in like flatlands. Not everyone has a plan, like Christmas, because we're just going to set up a commune and she's going to move north. And now we can't hear you, Christy, because you're muted.
I was replying to a chatter. Thank you very much.
Oh, okay. I saw your lips moving. I thought you were talking to me.
It would be easier to say it into my phone.
That makes sense.
Sometimes Google has grammar issues, and my apologies if there were any.
No worries. Okay. So I don't want to just read too much because Christy's got a handful of topics too. But everyone kind of gets my point, I'm sure, because it's pretty simple. What I really wanted to make sure I pointed out tonight, because we know most of this, it's how we connect things, it's how we connect these issues, because one, it makes our argument stronger, and two, they are just connected. Like, we need to focus on that because so many of our problems are intertwined right now. Like COVID, climate change, our economy, all of it.
Yes, and that's also in every country across the globe. You know, it's we're in a historical time. You know, there will be lots of studying this era, just as there are you know, and lots of studying still to this day of FDR and, you know, many other presidents. Eisenhower, a Republican, whose top tax bracket was 92%. You know, there are a lot of things to study in the history, in our history, in human history, to help us learn about today. And a lot of times, every day, almost listening to the news, the new news each day that seems to be totally new each day, which is, you know, for me growing up, there were news stories each night on the nightly news, but the country's news didn't change too much, not daily anyway. You know, it changed when, if something big happened, an October surprise right before an election or a scandal. It's been just crazy to keep up with the news. So this week, instead of picking a topic and going like really hardcore on it, finding everything I can find for you guys, there's just so many headlines. I would love to do that. And I picked a few to kind of just briskly go over, so that if you are interested and you would like, you know, sources for these, please get at me. I'll give them to you. But if you already know about them, then give yourself a pat on the back, because you are doing better than like 80% of this nation. All right, so headlines we should all be aware of. And that means you know who I'm talking about. I know who I'm talking to. I hope somebody out there is like me. All right.
That was so scary.
Noam Chomsky, everybody knows that he is definitely somebody I admire and look up to. He is always stuck with his beliefs. He never sold out, ever, not once. And I'd say it recently, when he told people that if they were in a swing state that they should vote for Biden, people thought he really sold out, being an anarchist and, you know, anti-Democratic Party, anti-Republican Party. He thinks there should be a socialist party, a communist party, a labor party, you know, a fascist party, if you want to have like all of the parties so the people can be represented. Go ahead.
Is he one of those people who think that we should have more of like a parliament?
He thinks we should have more democracy.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Like, and like, so do I, but like,
not necessarily changing it to a parliament, but we have two. You know, we have the tiny little Libertarian Party and the even tinier, or I'd say it's actually bigger this year, Green Party. But we all know, who live in reality, that even if you wanted that person to win that was in either one of those, they're not even on the ballot in every state. It's just not possible. That's not democracy. That's saying, well, your state thinks he can be president, but ours doesn't, so he's not going to be on there. Or we don't recognize that. That's not democracy. So I just wanted to mention that little, you know, Noam Chomsky has been in the news a lot lately, which I think is just so ironic, considering he came out against the Vietnam War and was kind of shunned, even though he was still doing lots of PBS conversations and intellectual conversations, lots of debates. He was a professor, you know, at MIT. Super, super smart. He is the king of linguistics. He started the study of linguistics. That's all him. But Noam Chomsky recently, like in the last couple of days, got canceled, which is so funny, for being against cancel culture. So he, along with many other people, many of whom I don't agree with their politics, many I do, which is the point, that we do not have the right to cancel someone else because their opinions are different than ours. If you do not like a speech someone is giving, you can protest it. That's legal. You can not go to it. I mean, the best thing to do to a bad idea like fascism or slavery or any horrid things in our past as humanity, is to come up with a better idea, you know, to say, okay, we did that. These are the harms of it. Let's try this. So far, we figured out those harms won't be in it. And let's try that. Then we moved on to feudalism, you know, from kings and queens to feudalism. And capitalism is feudalism a lot. I mean, there are many similarities, I'd have to say. But him being canceled for saying you shouldn't cancel people for having other opinions is fucking dumb.
Ludicrous.
So, yeah,
I heard that
it is.
before. I was thinking of covering that. Glad
I
you
mean,
did.
it's just, yeah, I couldn't like, no, okay. His reason for being for opinions that he doesn't agree with. Okay, I agree with that. I do not agree with a neo-Nazi. I do not agree with someone who, has Trump that bitch on her shirt and a red MAGA hat. Probably we're not going to have a lot of politics to agree on. But that doesn't mean that I don't stand up and would march for your right to speak. I don't think the government should ever step in on free speech unless it's you want to be a jackass and yell fire in the middle of a movie, in the theater. That's illegal, by the way. You can't do that. There are limits to free speech. But Noam Chomsky's a free speech absolutist. He go for it, Mac.
Okay. I didn't want to cut you off. I was gonna wait until like the end of your sentence. Okay. I mean, like, no, we really strive to be consistent here, right? Like, we aren't like the NRA that like supports everyone having a gun until the Black Panthers roll up with semi-automatics, and they're like, oh, hold on, maybe we should do regulations. Never mind. No, we are pretty close to like free speech absolutists here, right? So just to piggyback on what Christy was saying, like, yeah, we don't agree with neo-Nazis, no, but we are free speech absolutists. So we do hold to the belief that they should be able to say what they want as well. Like, we don't want a call for violence or like anyone doxing anyone. That's beyond what free speech is, right?
Right. And I think a lot of people don't
it.
educate themselves on free speech. Free
Right.
speech has nothing to do with a neo-Nazi or a far leftist up on a stage talking and people showing up to be so loud that that person isn't heard. That's not taking away their free speech. That's their idea is bigger than yours. More people disagree with you than your idea. It means that you're not going to get heard at this particular point. Doesn't mean the government stepped in to shut you down. Free speech is part of our Constitution. It is our First Amendment, very first. If the government comes in and shuts down a far leftist or a far right or, some homeless guy with a megaphone, I feel like all of us should step up and stand up for that person, even if you think his ideas are abhorrent, because that sets a precedent. If one person can be taken down by the government for his opinions, which we like to pride ourselves as being land of the free, home of the brave, and that we don't do that, lock up journalists. Well, our history shows different, way different. We had our first socialist taking over in the polls in the early 1900s. Oh, I can't remember his name. I love him. I know so much about him. I'll think of it. I will. I've talked about him before many times. He actually stood up during one of his speeches and said to all of the people listening, the government wants you to go to this World War I. I'm telling you that it is for profit, that it is an imperial war, that it is for this company, the banana company, a few others to get in, get their foothold and be able to take what they want and to claim more land. Now, of course, it's not black and white. There's way more to it. And there was injustices being done. And they used those injustices to go to war to get even more than they should have. Now, because he said those things and then followed it with, you do not have to go, even if you're drafted. By law, we have something called conscientious objector. You have to do it correctly. You cannot just say, I conscientiously object to this war. Well, great. That doesn't mean shit. You have to actually fill out the forms properly. And I would suggest if you are in this position, congratulations. I'm proud of you. That is braver than that's so brave, because you're going to get a lot of shit. However, if you feel that the war that is going on, that they're going to be sending you to, is unjust or against your values, yeah, conscientious objection is a part of our laws for you. Now, because he said that, mentioned that to people, they arrested him under the Espionage Act, the one we got, WikiLeaks guy. I can't remember, my mind.
Julian Assange.
Yeah, Julian Assange. That's what he's being charged with, which blows my mind. He's not from here. He's not an American. You can't charge him with our rules. Kill for yourself, America. Put your normal size pants back on. You're not that big.
That's treasonous.
Yes, it's crazy. But they put him in prison for espionage, saying he was trying to help our foes by stopping, men, essentially, and going into World War I. And they kept him in there. Debs.
Eugene
DEBBS.
Debs.
Yeah. DEBBS. Debs. Yeah, or BS.
Susie said definitely. Oh, I got it.
Yeah, I got it. They kept him in there long enough that he couldn't run for president on purpose, even though he was filling out. We didn't have stadiums like we do now, but everybody came to hear him. Huh?
Who did they do that to in South America?
Yeah, I can't remember his name, but they kept him in prison for a long time.
Was that Bolivia, or was?
No, it was South America, and it was the man that Joe Biden lied and said he got arrested with. Yeah, it was during the apartheid. They locked him up because he was speaking justice and truth, and and it was an apartheid. I'm sorry, blacks are less than, and you need to stay there. I know you guys are the minority here in Africa, but we're the minority rulers, and you're gonna listen to us. So that's the apartheid they had going on, and they were trying to move it even further into what America had done, pushing them into reservations. So this is it. That's what you get. Well, back to Noam Chomsky. This isn't a left or right problem. I mean, this isn't even a left or right argument. This is an American tradition. Free speech allows anyone to disagree with anyone else. It allows anyone to agree with anyone else loudly, opinionly. Opinionly, is that a word? With a megaphone, on a stage, in a letter, on a post. I think that the government at no time should step in and arrest you because your opinions don't align with them. So when you hear people online or family or friends say, well, they're taking away our free speech, who is the they? Is it the crowds of anti-protesters, the counter-protesters? That's not the definition of free speech. If you go to give a speech and 25 people show up to hear it, but 2,000 come to protest it, well, you're not going to get heard, and you might could try again if you want to, somewhere where there's not as many informed people, but the government never stepped in. So you complaining about your free speech rights being taken away is preposterous. And I also wanted to say that many of the people that gave their reasoning for canceling Noam Chomsky because he doesn't like cancel culture was Barry Weiss, and a few other people like J.K. Rowling, who is in trouble right now for writing a letter to women that very, very, very much excluded all trans women. The title of it was she wanted to talk to the ladies, and she means all of those who actually bleed. I couldn't believe she even actually bleed.
Oh, okay.
Like, if you're not a biological woman, I'm talking to you.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure comedians could get away with stuff like that up on stage and still be on their side. And J.K. Rowling also has much that I read through that is pro-trans and pro-solidarity. And I couldn't believe that she wrote it. It was in bad taste. And I guess she's like tripling and quadrupling down on it. And she signed this thing too. Now, like I said, Noam doesn't have to agree with all of these 100 and however many people who signed something that had a very beautiful statement that they agreed with. It doesn't matter who signs or agrees with this statement. All that matters is this statement is what the people who signed it agree with. Now, those people who signed it, they don't have to know each other, like each other, agree with each other, or even have the same politics to agree that canceling people because you don't like their opinions is a form of bullying, is a form of, okay, here's my thing on it. If you don't like an argument or an opinion, you can't just cancel them. Like, fine, delete everything about them. I never want to see them again. I mean, you can live in that bubble, but that's not going to, as our queen bee, Shannon Q says, elevate the discourse. It's just not. So if you find somebody whose opinion you disagree with, the best way to counter that is to talk to them, to ask them questions, to get at the root, use some straight epistemology, and then also have, be ready to provide sources that show so they can see that they may be wrong. Don't call them stupid. Don't call them ignorant. Don't call them a jackass or all of the other horrible things you could call them if you're trying to elevate the discourse, which is very humanist, and that's what we're about here. And I think that what
I said I can't even call him a jackass.
I mean, to yourself you can. Maybe if you've done all the right things and then he calls you a very nasty word and hangs up on you, well, yeah, then he's obviously a jackass. If he rage quits, because that's canceling someone is it's equivalent to rage quitting. I don't have a good enough argument. I cannot compete with this man or woman's intellect. They're asking me too hard questions, and so just hang up on them. I think that because of all of the many snowflake wing, we have a huge snowflake wing. Many are on the right, many are on the left. They can just be in the same wing together when it comes to the snowflakes. These guys canceled Noam Chomsky, a living legend for free speech, not even comprehending that cancel culture goes against free speech. I laughed. I was frustrated. I pulled my hair. I couldn't believe, I do not support canceling people. Okay. Now, don't get me wrong. If there was a leader of, let's just name something that would be so extraordinarily bad. A leader in KKK gets his own channel and he's loud about it. And he is out there, every day putting out false information, statistics that he gets from far right shills and grifters. I think that the smart thing to do would be not him, you're not going to change him, would be to interact with the people who are listening to him and try to change their minds if you care. And if he's not this hypothetical, I know words, I know the best words, this hypothetical KKK YouTube star, unless he starts advocating for lynching people and using the N word, unless he starts being, he's got to understand you have a responsibility with people that show up to listen to you. If he's not inciting violence, there's no reason to cancel him. However, if he does, letting the people above him, YouTube, know this is what's going, reporting this thing, that's not the same as cancel culture. That's reporting, listen, this is what I just saw, and I think that people may be hurt by it. That's completely acceptable. But canceling him because he's a member of KKK, I can't say that I don't agree that would feel really good, because you'd have to be really hateful and ignorant to be a part of that organization. However, as an ex-magical thinker, I used to believe in things that weren't true, and I don't anymore. I used to, believe in some really crazy things. So none of them were hateful, but they were wrong. And if I can let go of it, I think many other people could too. And like I said, it wouldn't be about reaching that particular person. It would be about reaching the people who are searching for something. They know something's wrong. And so they tuned in to hear this guy talk about things that make them feel better, because that means that if those people are the problem, it's not their problem. So, oh goodness. If you can't beat someone's ideas and you have to cancel them, you're on the wrong side of history. But I wanted to add to that.
Awesome.
Do you want to add anything to that before next headline?
Yes.
Yes.
I have so much to say about it, but I want to make it quick because you said you have like 8 of these, right? 7. Okay. So we're still set for another 2 hours if we keep that amount of time. So I'll try to make it quick. Okay. 1, I typed this out so I wouldn't forget it. Well, I really like how you likened canceling culture to rage quitting. That was nice. That was clever. Thank you for that. I typed that one down. That's really great. I also typed a little Mac quote of, when you cancel debate, you invite dogma. So just think about that. It's a really short way to say a lot. When you cancel, when you shut down someone else's opinion, then all you hear, like, you can liken that to echo chambers, and you can liken that to exactly what the right says the left, the radical, regressive left is the only opinion that is to be heard is the right one, and that is ours. That's dogma. That's just what dogma is. And we are a non-religious channel here that is religious thinking, a habitable thinking. To be religious doesn't mean that you are spiritual at the same time. They aren't exclusive. They seem like they're exclusive, but to do something religiously doesn't necessarily mean that you are doing something that has to do with magic or spiritualness at all. Doing religious thinking can be just dogmatic thinking, very similar. It's closer to that than just spiritual. So I really wanted to point that out. And then I wanted to give an example, and I don't think I've listened to the whole thing, but I'm going to put another YouTube link down below. Why don't you guys pull this up and listen to it maybe tomorrow morning when you have time. This is a link to one of Joe Rogan's podcasts with Darrell Davis. I'm not sure if you remember this one, Christy. I'll give everyone a little bit of a tidbit of this guy's story. Darrell Davis, he's a blues magician. He's a black man, and for the past 30 years, he's spent time befriending members of the Ku Klux Klan. And he's gotten.
He has a documentary, you guys.
Okay.
If you don't want to read anything, he has a documentary. It's
Yes.
mind-blowing beautiful.
I haven't seen the documentary yet, but in a nutshell, by spending time with people who have abhorrent views, he got 200 Klansmen to give up their robes. If I remember right, most of them gave them to Darrow. Like he
keeps them up. He has them all. He has an entire room and then some of KKK memorabilia, and many of them were like, I don't want this. I can't have it near me anymore. Will you please take it? And of course, I mean, yeah, I think most people not knowing that, going into a black man's house and seeing an entire shit ton of KKK stuff would be like, did I switch planets? Like, what is going on right now? Did I somehow like zone into a different year or different? I don't know, because it wouldn't seem normal. But his story is one of unconditional love for human people. I mean, he inspires me. It would be hard. I don't think that I could be as brave as him. Not as a black man.
Yeah, because that's a scary way to do something really good.
He'll show up at the rallies and hang out and talk to people.
Yeah. I really encourage everyone to not only look into Darrell Davis here, because he has a really, really great story, but also look up, I think it's just Let's Talk, Shannon Q. That's one of the first series that Shannon did on Steve McRae's channel. And those talks, Steve McRae just set up people with some of the craziest views, who were pretty much extremists of their worlds. And Shannon just talked to them to figure out what they thought. And they are some of the most interesting conversations I've heard up to this day. And I've listened to a lot of debates, a lot of conversations, and hers are really just the epitome of just what conversation should be, how discourse should be had. And you cannot have that kind or that level of discourse if you shut people down, if you cancel people. You just can't. And you don't get anywhere with those people. What you get is you help them make a bubble to stay inside and grow conspiracy theories and abhorrent views. Not saying I have all of the right views, but if I don't feel like I can go outside my own bubble, it's really easy to stay in it. I expose myself to a lot of Tucker Carlson. I really don't like that guy. And I used to expose myself to like a lot of Ben Shapiro and Kent Hovind and all of that great jazz, because it's important. It's important to listen to people you don't agree with, because it's really easy not to. And it's really easy to just go in an echo chamber and just criticize the whole time and just not try to understand. It's really a skill to have to steel man your opponent.
Yes.
And I'm not trying to up myself at all by saying like I do have this skill. I'm not saying I'm better than anyone for it, but I feel better about myself because I have that skill. Yeah. It's really important.
It's a lot of learning that the old you that would have said, like, what do you mean you don't believe it? It's right here. From doing that to saying, really, well, where'd you learn that? Can you tell me? Because I want to know what you know. And then, reading it together and going, well, how do we debunk this? Or how do we find out if this is true together? I would already know the answers to this and that it's wrong. It means putting those things away no gotchas, no putting them in the corner to earn points. It's literally about trying to understand why they believe what they believe is true. How do they know what, do they think that they, believe something that is true? And it most likely, I would probably say like 9.999% of the out of 10 of the time, nothing magnificent is going to probably happen during the first conversation. You're going to leave a seed. You're just going to plant a seed because you didn't offend them. You didn't hurt their feelings. You were genuinely interested in what they had to offer, what they believed. You really want to find out what it is. And honestly, this is honest. This isn't a part of me faking it. If there is a God that is real and demonstrable, I want to fucking know. I want to know the most true things, I want to believe as few, false things as possible. And I want to believe as many true things as possible. And that part is genuine. I'm not saying to lie to them. I'm just saying omitting, that giving them the, well, let's just grant that and go from there. I find that even if you do that 4, 5, 6, 7 conversations, that 8th conversation, it's not about being more aggressive. It's about now getting to like, well, you've told me this before. And then when we dug deep, that wasn't the reason why you believed it. So obviously it's something else. Let's dig into that together. You have to really, really want to help change the world, because it's not something that you're going to get paid for, and you're going to have to do it on your own time, and you're going to have to be informed enough that when they ask you, how do you know that, you can show them. So, and then I've said this before. I like I said that cancel culture is like rage quitting. I love this. Boycotts are just sanctions for the wealthy ruling class. Yeah. When you boycott Israel's businesses, the ruling class who own those businesses are the ones who are like, wait. If people were to boycott American businesses, it would be the big ones, the big, huge American businesses. And the little people like us, the serfs who work at these industries for an hourly wage, would be let off because they wouldn't be, it would hurt the economy. Sanctions, how we hear our government all the time tell us, well, Russia did this, so we put more sanction on them, and everybody's like, or Nancy Pelosi doing something like that. I think that clapping for sanctions makes you a hella bad person if you took the time to understand. There wasn't too long ago, a good 8 to 10 years ago, I would have heard, they did what? Oh, we did. Oh, we at least put sanctions on them. Okay, that's good. Not knowing the fuck about a sanction. Just that we had the power to do it and it hurt them. I was sold on what we were told. It hurts. It's like a surgeon. It goes in there with a scalpel. It only hurts the wealthy and the ruling class and the government. It doesn't hurt the people. But that's the opposite of the truth. Sanctions hurt the least among a people first. So I just thought everyone think about that for a minute. And if you believe that as well as I do, that boycotts are just sanctions for the wealthy, spread it. Because then that way, when someone gets mad that you're boycotting, can be like, well, why would you be mad that I'm boycotting? Are you part of the ruling class or the wealthy? No, then you have nothing to worry about. Okay.
I think
next topic, which I'm super stoked about. You ready?
Yeah.
The Supreme Court has rejected Trump's ridiculous claim of absolute immunity under law. A Manhattan grand jury may have access to all of Trump's New York taxes, etc., but it doesn't look like anyone else will get to see them until after the November presidential election. And it was a unanimous decision. So this court set precedent. I mean, what they did was solidify that no matter who is in the Oval Office, they are not above any other person. Now we know that's not true in reality. On paper it is now. On paper, nobody is better than anyone else. And no one is above the law. And our Supreme Court, our highest, laws of the land demand that nobody is higher than the law, because Trump said he had executive immunity. He was just making shit up. Wait, what? I'm in the executive branch and I need to be executive immunity. That's what we're going to call it. I know there's a history to it. I'm just being silly. I know it came way before him. However, it's still, I'm like, really? Executive immunity? Then I have silver hair immunity. Like, you can't. Oh, it's so silly. Number 3 headline I think we should all be very, very much aware of, because I cried. So, Supreme Court ruled yesterday, July 9th, 2020, that about half of Oklahoma is Native American land. Recognizing a 19th century treaty with the Muskogee Creek Nation, mostly known for the middle word Creek. What tribe? They'd say Creek, but it is the full name is Muskogee Creek Nation. Muskogee Creek Nation had this to say about the Supreme Court's decision, quote, "The Supreme Court today kept the United States' sacred promise to the Muskogee Creek Nation of a protected reservation. Today's decision will allow the nation to honor our ancestors by maintaining and establishing sovereignty and territorial boundaries from the Muskogee Creek Nation." There's from their official site. This part, okay, Trump put a couple of justices in, right? One of them, both of them, I was like, ugh. But Neil Gorsuch wrote, and I quote, "On the far end of the Trail of Tears was a promise." Do you need me to stop? Anyone need me to stop? You know what the Trail of Tears is? I can cover it. Okay, Mac does. I'll just do like a 1-minute breakdown. There were 4 tribes or more involved, and they lived in Alabama, northern Florida, Tennessee, a big, huge, beautiful farmland, and there were a lot of wealthy newcomers coming over and making a big deal for them, making a big name for them in farming, but they needed more farmland. And the best farmland they could find, because at this point in time in history, they couldn't go west. They were not allowed to go west. They could only go so far. So they needed that land. Now the Supreme Court said, no, you cannot annex this land from them. We have treaties. Our President Trump's favoriteest president in the world, Andrew Jackson, said, fuck you to the Supreme Court, and at bayonet tip made 4 different nations of indigenous people, plus more, walk to Oklahoma. And they were on horses, but most of the indigenous people were on foot. Some were pregnant, so they couldn't keep walking. They died. Many were old. and they just couldn't keep up. They died. Sometimes the general or person looking over them didn't have the heart to shoot them in the head when they couldn't walk no more, and would leave them with a little bit of water. But obviously they're going to, they were so old, they needed someone to help them. They died. So many died on the way to this march from their indigenous lands to Oklahoma, where they were promised, documented, signed that this will be your land forever. And, it was illegal that Jackson did that. It's disgusting that it was done. It's immoral. It's gross. And so I'm kind of flabbergasted that Gorsuch starts off with, on the far end of the Trail of Tears, there was a promise. Forced to leave their ancestral lands in Georgia and Alabama and more, the Creek Nation received assurances that their new lands in the West would be secure forever. Because Congress has not said otherwise, we hold the government to its word. So he said, this treaty is the ruling of the land. That it is what it is. And so I was very curious. So I did a little bit of recon on Neil Gorsuch that I hadn't done before, because I wasn't even thinking to look into any cases he had heard prior to being Supreme Court on indigenous issues. And he has voted in favor of indigenous peoples every single time. And I didn't know that. And I appreciate that, because, to think that there's people in our Supreme Court justices, in that small group of rule makers that have no moral compass, is scary as fuck, especially considering I know that Gorsuch will vote, if the case is corporate versus people, he will vote corporate every single time. I hope he proves me wrong, but his record shows different. So Rebecca Nagel, an indigenous activist, which you guys can follow her if you want. Rebecca is Rebecca, traditional spelling. Last name Nagle, Nagle. An indigenous activist, she tweeted, quote, "The big news at the Supreme Court today will be Trump's taxes and how New York will be able to see them." That is the biggest news, especially on MSNBC today. It's gross. But for Indians in Oklahoma, we'll be talking about today for decades to come. After a century of Oklahoma not following our treaty rights, the Supreme Court said, quote, "no more," unquote. Eastern Oklahoma is Indian country, end quote. Ancestors by maintaining our established sovereignty and territorial boundaries, Creek Nation also said. So, yes, is Indian country. Justice Neil Gorsuch, a Trump appointee, led this decision. Native American groups supported on indigenous rights has been pretty on the money. Like I said, I did a little bit of extra research, and he voted right, the correct way as a judge, or made a ruling for indigenous when it was an option. This ruling was based on the Muskogee Creek Nation's historic claims, but may very well affect 4 other tribes as well: the Cherokee, the Chickasaw, the Choctaw, and the Sioux Nation, because they all were part of the Trail of Tears as well, and had land taken and had treaties drawn up, and those treaties have been shit on as well. This is the most important ruling in Indian law case in the last half a century to come down from the Supreme Court. It's a very powerful ruling for all indigenous people of America and from around the planet. Of the Supreme Court decision itself goes far beyond Oklahoma. Andrew Jackson defied the Supreme Court, like I had said, and forcefully removed those indigenous peoples from prime croplands that the wealthy wanted their hands on. And at points of bayonets, bayonets are gross. They're knives attached to guns. I'm sure everybody knows that, but maybe in case somebody didn't know, that's what it was. And it's called a bayonet because Louis, King Louis of France, wanted, and at the time had one of the best armies on the planet. He wanted an even more lethal weapon than, the gun where you had to sit down and put the powder in and put the piece of cloth in and put the bullet in and just, they had to do all these things. Well, sometimes you don't have time, so they put bayonets, and bayonet is a French word. So a little bit of history for you. If they couldn't keep up, they were killed or left to die where they lay. Of course, like I mentioned, Jackson is Trump's absolute favorite president. And as Donald Trump's very first meeting with the tribes of this country as acting president, he made sure to take them into the room where the Oval Office, where he made sure Andrew Jackson's painting was up. Like it had been purposely put in there. It wasn't like, well, that's just where it goes. So, and he wanted to take pictures, like line up here with Andrew Jackson behind me. Next topic. It is 1, 2.5 lines. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry. All right. Thank you. Sorry. I had to add on to it. So I looked up the story from Reuters on this, and this was all brought to the court again because of a rape allegation. Or a rape conviction, and about the location. And
no, like I said, there are so many of these stories that I wanted to do a deep dive in, but there's too many of them to cover it. So yeah, I implore you to look up this story, and it is about a rape case.
It's
Native Americans, if a Native American girl is raped by a white man, even on Native territory, there's not too much shit. There's nothing they can arrest him. They can take him to court, but it's up to the federal government to punish him. Now, if a Native American commits a crime on non-reservation land, well, their courts, Native courts don't get a say. So you can see how that's just super duper fair on both sides.
Right. And speaking of fair, this is
Sorry.
what I really okay. This is something that really drives me nuts, especially on Fox News when I hear it, or someone that Dave Rubin is interviewing when we talk about reparations.
Rave Dubin.
When we talk about reparations for the Black community, mostly because of slavery, and the fact that the white men who lost their employees got reparations. But one of the counterpoints that a lot of conservatives will use, how is it a counterpoint to say, well then wouldn't we just have to have a conversation about giving reparations to the Native Americans? Now you're on to something, right? It shouldn't be a counterpoint. It is what logically follows next, or maybe first. It's really hard to tell. It makes me furious to think about it. Absolutely furious. And I just wanted to let everyone know why I'm sitting here furious while Christy's talking. It's because of her voice. All right, go on.
Let's see. It makes me infuriating. It does. I think that if you are going to set a precedent that these treaties were signed and law, and the law's never been changed, then that's the fucking rules. That's how they are. Well, the law also, not so much has it been made into a policy, but it is written that every freed slave would get 40 acres and a mule, which at that time would be where they could grow their own food, build a house, raise their children, sell a cash crop like tobacco, become equal. You got to understand that they just became free. Everything they had was what was allowed to them. The clothes they wore were just to cover up. They weren't for looks, unless it was a very wealthy household who wanted their indoor slaves to look proper, like a housekeeper with an apron. And they worked in the kitchen, they needed to look nice, of course. The wealthy did brag about, how my buck, which is a gross name to call a black man who is tall and muscular, they were sold as cattle. So if my buck, could beat up your buck and would make them fight and bet on it, just. So if we're going to set a precedent, well, it's the law and it hasn't been changed, then yes, I don't think 40 acres and a mule we need to make that contemporary. And I'm not even saying that every single, if you are a descendant of a slave, your family deserves something. And I also don't believe that it should just be cash, like they should not just a check. But in order to get generational wealth, you need property. You need to own a house. So we need programs for this particular group of people who are descendants of American slaves, where they go and they sign up and they take a first homeowners class, or even if they've owned a home and lost it because of circumstances that are shitty, doesn't matter. Because you're in this group, you get to come and take this class on first time homeowners. And then we have grants for this particular group to be able to have the money to put down and the closing costs, and make sure that their mortgage isn't astronomical. And we're not talking about mansions here. We're talking about, 1,100 square foot house, 2 bathrooms, 2 bedrooms, or 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, or a normal American, normal sized house. I think that is great, but I also think we should go further, because education was not allowed. You had to pretend to be ignorant if you knew how to read, because some masters would kill you. They would call you an uppity N-word. And if you knew how to read, they were scared because they would make the situation so that they would have, 1,500 black slave workers and, 5 to 10 white people who ran the establishment. Well, they could be overtaken easily. So we have to make sure that not only are they scared of us, but that that's beyond their thinking, that they never ever think to revolt. Because if they did, we would be overtaken. I think that's the same thing that happened in apartheid for South Africa, that it was ruled by a small ruling class of white people in Africa. So it makes me sick as well. It really does. I think that we should have a national dialogue on reparations, and it should be come on, didn't Reagan come in and say, listen, to all of the descendants of the Japanese who got put in internment encampments, I'm going to need you to contact us and apply for this. And we're giving everyone, I don't remember what it was, 20,000, 40,000 each, from the government as an apology, and which would be I remember the equivalent, now would be about 80,000 each, which is significant. And they were misplaced for, they weren't slaves, and they got to take some of their belongings, and their children weren't sold off, and it is different, but they were taken care of, or at least our nation acknowledged that they had done wrong and tried to make a right. And that's perfect. That's the road we need to be on, and we need to be on that road with everyone we've done wrong. The best way to become a great society is to acknowledge all of the faults that we as a nation have, all of the atrocities, the bombs that disintegrated people into dust. There's many things. An embargo on Cuba, like, get out of here. That is so bully. Leave them alone. I don't understand. We need to come to terms with what we wouldn't want done to us. Why the fuck are we doing it to other people? If we all of a sudden had a very small military, if we all of a sudden needed help, and other countries were big enough and scary enough to tell all the other countries, don't help them or we will put sanctions on you. We've got to start thinking about prospering morally and prospering as a good people and making a difference. If we do have the most power in the world, we should be using that great power for good. With great power comes great responsibility. It's not just in comic books, it's the real deal. All right. And the next topic, like I said, is 2.5 sentences. July 4th, Kanye West announces that he is absolutely running for president. He's a joke. Next comment. Next topic. There's way more into it, but I can't. And I do want to add that I do feel bad because I do want to make fun of him a little bit, but I've also seen him, like when he was in the Oval Office talking to the president, and I'm not a doctor by any means. This is just my opinion of having family members and friends who have mental illness and seeing what it looks like up close. And I could see that he was not stable. He was very manic. His topics were all over the place. He's very conspiratorial and evangelical. Like, God comes and takes the form of him in his head, and he becomes Jesus. And I think that I need to be cognitive that if I'm making fun of somebody, I need to also know that I'm making fun of their ideas and not the person. And if I make fun of a person for things that they do and they have a mental illness, I would feel so awful. I would probably cry.
Yeah.
I would probably announce to everyone that I probably shouldn't be a part of LEAH because I make fun of people with mental illnesses. That's my new thing, apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right.
That said, though, if I may say one funny.
Yes.
The only dick that Kanye is Christian enough to suck is Mike Pence's.
Oh, I love it. You can just turn all the lights off. That's how Pence does it anyway. And just say,
hey,
come here, mother.
Before we start, can my wife come in the room? She needs to be present.
Can mother come in the room?
Mother? I thought his wife.
No, he calls his mother, he calls his wife mother.
Ooh.
Pence calls his wife mother.
Creepception.
Every horror movie I've ever watched where there is a son and mother fucked up relationship. Yeah, goes right through my head. But yeah. All right. Economic implosion. I'm sorry. 25% of New York City renters, people who rent instead of own, haven't paid their rent since March. This will be a homeless epidemic all across the nation, not just in New York. It's just New York peaked before everyone else, so we're going to see it happen there and then go across the freaking country, unfortunately. This, what the policies is what we need to fix this. Talking about this, protesting this, yes to both, 100%. Last week you had mentioned that, people losing their homes because there's a pandemic, there's nothing they could do, should make people out in the streets, maybe even rioting. Like, what is going on that we just don't care enough to help people? And, you could say, well, the person who he owes the rent to has bills to pay too. They probably have 4 or 5 properties that they pay mortgages on, and they need that money. I agree. They do. That's why they need to be helped as well. And then that bank that it goes to, also, they have things that come in and out, and bills and things they're involved in. So I think that we put a just like a hold, just a rent hold. And for all the months that rent isn't paid, doesn't mean that it doesn't get paid. Say your lease ends in January. Well, you add 6 months to it. Now it doesn't. It ends in July. And, you just pick up when you can pick up. There's no reason that, injustice, riots. Yeah, 25% of New York. Have you guys ever even I've never been there, but I know what New York looks like. And I know that when I think of downtown Tampa, it's so cute. Downtown Tampa is huge. But compared to like Chicago, it's just a little baby city. It's so cute, little Tampa. And then Chicago next to New York is like, oh, but when you grow up, you'll be even bigger. So, and I am from Illinois and been to Chicago. It's huge. It's humongous. New York's bigger. So 25% of that is worse than depression. Depression never saw that. The policies that need to be created like as soon as humanly possible, or they just get kicked out. Then can be how we treat our citizens. That it can't be. I don't accept it. And other people aren't going to accept it either. They're not, at no fault of their own. They didn't slack off. They had a job. They paid all their bills. Whatever it might be. Even I'm even go further because, I'm a lefty. Say they were 5 days late each month for rent, but they still paid it. Or, it was hard to pay all their bills on time, so they staggered them, but they still made it. I've been both places. That doesn't mean that they deserve to lose the place they live because of a pandemic that nobody has control over. I think that policies are going to be the only thing that save them. Half of renters are food insecure, and this is not New York. This is across the entire country. Half of renters are food insecure. Think about that.
Just so you
Go ahead.
guys know, when Fox News is driving me nuts a little bit because they're so good at reporting the news the way they want you to hear it. Because I heard that. It's not that like CNN and MSNBC, where if it's not really a topic that they want you to know about, they just won't cover it. No, Fox actually covers it. They actually have clips of prominent members of the like Black Lives Matter movements, or like Tina Turner for like Bernie Sanders. Like, first they make them sound crazy, and then they just show them a clip. But they've primed you to think this is extreme. And what I'm thinking here, Christy just mentioned the, no, Christy, I forgot. What did you just mention?
Yo mama.
My mom.
Oh, it was that food insecure.
Food insecure. That. Sorry. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
They said something about that so many people are food in like insecure, but they mixed it in with a few other things with like the COVID crisis, and they're like, and what does food insecure mean? It's either you have food or you didn't. Like, they made that just sound silly, so no one pays attention to it. It's not important. People are just being crybabies, and it drives me nuts. It drives me absolutely nuts. But you can see how this is an actual problem. Like, to be food insecure means you don't know if you're going to be able to afford food this week or tomorrow, and you have 3 kids. Like, that's what food insecurity means.
Right.
Sorry.
Food insecure. I've been there with 2 girls, and it's Friday, and there's nothing in the fridge to make dinner. But I do have some rice in the cabinet, so I'm thinking, okay, I already have the rice. So if I get a bag of frozen vegetables for tonight, and a different one for tomorrow night, and a different one for the next night, that's 3 meals. Because rice and a couple cans of beans and vegetables, rice and beans and vegetables is a healthy meal. It might not be something we want to eat every night, but it's wholesome. It fills our bellies, and it goes a long way. So that $25 will just about cover vegetables for 3 days, beans for 3 days. Maybe I needed laundry detergent, and the girls needed tampons or something. They're both teenagers. That's cutting it pretty close. And so now that's 3 days. There's how many days in a week? So something always did work out, but I did have to go to, we have something here called Metropolitan Ministries. They have a food bank there, and they'll give you a card with your face on it after you apply. It takes like 3 or 4 hours to apply, because you go from room to room, where the first thing they do to you is grab your hands and start praying. Tell me what's on your mind and let's pray about it. And that just takes forever. And then they start asking you questions, and you bring your information they asked you to bring to prove that you need this help. And about 4 hours after getting there, and lots of praying and crying, because I'm so frustrating, because crying doesn't help me feed anybody. And this was while I was still a magical thinker. I just couldn't believe we have to pray again, like every single time. When I told one woman I started to cry, that, I just feel like the worst parent. I don't know if I'll be able to feed my kids this week. I'll make any mom cry. Immediately, hold my hands, let's pray about it. And it's just like, that's not what the fuck I need. If we're hungry, we need food. But I eventually, of course, got qualified, and they take you with a grocery cart into this room, and you have a list. You can get, 6 starches and 5 canned vegetables and 3 canned fruits, and 6 different dry products. So like potatoes in a box, or macaroni and cheese in a box, or instant mashed potatoes, that kind of thing, and a loaf of bread, and then cans of meat, like cans of tuna, stuff like that. So, I mean, there were times I had to do that because we were food insecure, because a lot of people don't know my backstory, but I couldn't work. I couldn't walk. I had a walker, and had to kind of relearn how to walk on my right foot. Yes, I have a pimp limp, but it looks real cool. So I use my pimp limp, okay? Nobody touched anyone, I promise. My daughter's cat is here for 3 days and she screams when cats look at her. She's like this big. She's so tiny. So anyway, food insecure is not something that I'm unfamiliar with. And to say that 50%, where was it?
100%.
Yes, half of renters are food insecure and couldn't afford medical bills or day-to-day expenses as the pandemic began. So now we're 6 months later because this particular study started in January. It was a study on food insecurity and, you know, a, a living wage, like working 40 and overtime, so 43 to 53 hours a week, um, and not being able to pay the bills, so you have to take on a second job. Meanwhile, you have kids that never see you, and they are not getting the best out of the world because they need you to show them these things, and you're not there. And I get it that you can't be, or they won't have a roof over your head. It's just it's not moral. If we can have a different way, if we can have a different way where we all agree that there should be no such thing as a human in America who works a full-time job, that full-time job isn't a living wage, not just $15 an hour. That's not a living wage in New York or San Francisco. That's a living wage in like the middle of 90 citizen town in Mississippi. That will work there. It needs to be adjusted for location. It needs to be adjusted for inflation, and it needs to be a living wage. A living wage like FDR talked about, where people have enough money to pay. He said, if you got 2 paychecks a month, FDR, the first one should pay for every one of your bills, plus food for the first 2 weeks, and enough to put in savings. The next one should be for leisure, kids, whatever they need, clothes, instruments, and then savings. That's what he wanted. That way, every American had a decent life where they could actually do things that they care about, have hobbies, be able to afford the things their kids want to do. They want to be a part of, the concert band. Well, the concert bands are expensive, the instruments are expensive, the outfits are expensive, and then they travel, and that's expensive. And you don't want to have the one kid who is on a weekend, you know, traveling band concert excursion and has $5 each day to eat all day. And that giving $15 to that kid took money away from the household that you now only have, $15 to get by on, also with you and your other, it's just a living wage means so much. And the policies to create that are doable. They're so doable. It just takes, what do we care about as a people? And if you can put yourself in other people's shoes, people who never got a leg up, didn't start with, not even two parents, or parents who weren't dysfunctional. There's a lot of families who live with both mom and dad, and it's dysfunctional as fuck. They're alcoholics, they beat on each other. Just because parents stay together doesn't mean it's the best either. Now, I think that it's going to be a big thing for us to accomplish. I am not sitting here thinking, no, we just write the policies and everybody's happy. If 6 months later, if these 50% of renters were food insecure in January, they got a one-time payment of $1,200. Seriously, I just thank goodness that the poor, the work poor in this country, which is in most countries, but in this country especially, are the essential workers. I mean, they just are. So most of our working poor have worked this time, hasn't had to not have coming in and only be, waiting for that $1,200 or it's gone, obviously, the first month.
Yeah.
It just means that we are also the first ones to be exposed to most things. And if you are an essential worker, LEAH thanks you. This whole channel thanks you. Not Jump Shore thanks you. I thank you. Mac thanks you. I think you're heroes, and I think you're overworked and underpaid. And if it was up to me, all of you guys would be unionized. All of you guys would be unionized. And healthcare would be part of being born here or becoming a citizen, so that if you didn't like your job, you could just say, screw it. Like most of the middle class in this country who have been laid off, that healthcare came with their job. Well, now they're getting to see what it's like for everybody under them who has never had health insurance or has health insurance, because when Obama was president, you had to have it. But the plan that they got had a $5,000 deductible. And at no time in their life are they going to, at this particular point in their life, are they going to have an extra $5,000 laying around to go to the doctor, because they're going to have to pay for it until they meet that deductible. Well, I just find it an unjust, immoral, and kind of gross. If the leaders, good leaders of this nation, want a unified country, well, yeah, I want my family unified. I want the people I care about unified. I want us all to be, caring about each other and worried about each other and checking in on each other. Well, we're a big family. America is all of us live here. And so we should all want my grandmother's care to be just as good as Bill Gates' grandmother's care, because I love my grandmother just as much as he loves her. I don't see the difference at all. A human is a human is a human. And if they need care, they should get it. And that's how I feel about that. So I wanted to say, do your part. And like I said, it's not just, sharing something online. Look up local food banks. Rent assistant programs, which look for the nonprofit ones, please. Rent assistance is available, especially in all big cities. And if you are in a more rural area, it does not mean that it's not available. It just means that you're going to need help finding it. Volunteer, or if you or someone you know is in need of food or assistance in any way during this pandemic, you can find assistance locally or otherwise by yourself. And if you cannot find anything or don't know how, that's fine too. If you go online and go, I don't know what I'm looking for, that's fine. Don't be overwhelmed. You're already suffering enough. You're in need. You need assistance. I'd say contact me via Facebook Messenger. I am Christy Santiago on Facebook. You'll see that I'm friends with Mac and many others, so you'll know that it's me and the silver, stripe thingy going on. And I'll personally help you find some help in your area from where I am. We are all in this together. We, you, I, all of us. We're all that we've got, guys. We've got to help each other because magic doesn't exist. Unfortunately, it just doesn't. And praying for assistance, as I found out as magical thinker, in dire need of assistance, doesn't help you receive any assistance. Actively looking and applying for assistance or asking a friend to help with finding assistance will work. And like I said, I will help anybody find assistance if you're having trouble finding it, or if you looked up, like I asked if anybody wants to look up rent assistance programs in their area, just post them. Just, hey, look, I found a rent assistant program. Post it on Facebook, post it on Twitter. Tell people if you're having problems. It can be I don't need to know. Here's the number. We need to show each other that we care enough to get through this.
It's a good humanist thing to do.
Yes, I agree. And then I would say this last headline, if Bamilzebub was here, his hands would be in fists and he'd need another beer. So, Catholic Church gets COVID funding assistance from taxpayers, which we here all know that religious organizations cannot receive $1 from government. But the amount the Catholic Church collected this is what we are just finding out. So the numbers will be better in a week or two. But what we know for a fact is that it's between 1.4 billion with a B for boy and 3.5 billion. That's what the Catholic Church got. The diocese. The diocesan, I'm dyslexic, so sometimes I have to look away from the word because the
diocese.
Yeah, but it's not the diocese, it's the diocesan fiscal. Yeah, the diocesan fiscal management conference. They lobbied. That's what the diocesan fiscal management conference, aka lobbyists. They lobbied and lobbied and lobbied. An organization of Catholic financial officers surveyed members and reported that 9,000 Catholic entities received loans. So many inappropriate entities received tax/COVID-19 funding before actual small businesses got them. Remember, you have to have under 500 employees to qualify for this particular funding to be called a small business. I don't know any small business that has 499 people. None. I know small businesses that have 8 employees. Right. So that's some bullshit right there. And if anybody falls for it, well, I only have 498, so I'm a small business. That's bullshit. You know it. I also remember that this money was let go. It was allocated for small businesses with 500 or less employees. And then I also remember about 2 or 3 weeks later, that particular money account was gone. Remember, they ran out of money for small businesses? Well, the Catholic Church was among the very first to get these billions. And some of these small businesses, like mom and pop's hair salons that have, 5 or 6 hairdressers working for them, 1 esthetician and a massage therapist and a nail tech, an actual small business. They need to stay afloat. People can't come in to get these services because 6 feet and math, a logic. So they actually needed that money, and they ran out because the lobbyists got to them first, and American taxpayers handed over to the Catholic Church, which there's no way in heaven or hell or reality that the Catholic Church has 500 or less employees. Give me a fucking break. They have tens of thousands of employees just in this country, if not more.
And honestly, just like you said, there's no way they have less than 500 employees in heaven or hell. Like, right. There's definitely over 500 in hell.
Yeah, all the cool kids.
No, don't mind the kids.
It ran out before these small businesses could get it. Now, like all of the news with Trump and his administration and many presidents' administrations, things happen, and then a month or two later, the paperwork from that starts becoming available, not to the public, but to journalists. You have to actually go seeking it. That's why we don't know what the actual number is. We just know it's between 1.4 billion and 3.5 billion that the Catholic Church got. I'm sorry, but let me just rant real quick. The Vatican is its own sovereign country, has its own military, its own court system, its own police, its own goddamn banks, and its own vaults with like world treasures in there from thousands of years of raping, pillaging, and taking whatever they wanted. I don't understand why they couldn't sell off one of their gold goblets from King Louis or something. Like, I don't understand why they needed taxpayer money or how they were allowed to receive it and why people aren't in the goddamn streets about it. We have separation between church and state for a reason, for a big reason. Unless the Catholic Church all of a sudden has a change of heart and says, you know what? Oh, excuse me. I feel guilty. You know, Bezos and Amazon, he's the wealthiest man and he doesn't pay taxes. And we are the wealthiest religious organization on the planet and have been for a very long time. We want to start paying our fair share in taxes. That's not ever going to happen. But they'll be real quick to take that taxpayer money while we have food insecurity, people not paying rent since March, people not being able to get medical care because they can't afford just to go to a doctor here where I am without insurance. Call around. There are free clinics, but you also have to qualify for them. Let's say that you make, $32,000 a year, and that pretty much makes it so that you're almost living check to check. To go see a doctor, you want to see a specialist, but you have to see a doctor to get referred to a specialist. Well, that doctor is going to charge you anywhere from 120 to 220, 250 for the visit, cash or debit card, credit card too. They'll take anything. And all that doctor is going to do is look you over if you're trying to see a specialist. And if in his opinion, you should go on to see a specialist, he'll write the referral. Now you have to also pay for that specialist. That was just a primary care. This specialist is 400, 500 per, meeting with them per visit. So now you have to come up with that. Now, let's say that he finds something wrong, that you were right to go to the specialist. You don't have money to keep going. Like, you just spent almost $1,000 on just those two, and now you have what? You're living pay to pay, check to check. So now you're using your credit cards. It's not fair. It's so not fair that the Catholic Church, they shouldn't have got anything. No religious organization should have. Yeah, that one really, really, really made me mad. Hold on 1 second.
Yeah, that made me pretty upset too. So,
yeah, right? It's just so shitty. I wanted to also say that there is a little bit of irony. Also, if we have any libertarians, and I'm not talking about actual textbook libertarians or like Bo from the Fifth Column. I'm not talking about the humanist libertarians, the left-leaning libertarians. I'm talking about the USA version of it, the Ayn Rand version of it, that you pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you never accept government money because that means that you're living off the teat of the government and you're the lowliest type of person. And this whole taxes are theft theology that they kind of, it's almost like a religion that the American libertarians, and I have to, of course, state, because we live in cancel culture, no broad brush, hashtag not all. However, the majority I get in conversations with, and I do like to get in conversations with them because I, kind of believed a few of those things. I was misguided. A few of the beliefs of that they're kind of the pillars they believe in. At one point, I also said something as dumb as, this country should be run like a business. We need a businessman in there. Like, now I'm like, I can't believe I even said that out loud. It's not a business. It's a country. It should not be ran for profits and the bottom line and like all that. No, you don't cut the fat. Who's the fat? Maybe I like that fat person. Leave them alone. Like, it makes me really worried. But I do have to add that Ayn Rand, who wrote, Atlas Shrugged, which was, let's see, what was his name? Ryan from the last GOP, Paul Ryan and his Atlas Shrugged, that was the book. We also have Rand Paul, who is still in office. Ayn Rand is his person. She had it so right. Well, she dissed taking any assistance or creating programs to help people her entire life. She called them, they must have been ignorant. These are the people that, why would we help them if they couldn't even help themselves? We should be giving money to nobody. She didn't want any government handouts to anyone. She didn't want the government to exist as a welfare state ever. Everything that she preached. She died on government assistance because she couldn't afford to take care of herself. And I'm not smiling. That's really sad. However, the Ayn Rand Institute received billions or millions or whatever from this COVID. Their institute received money within the first week or so before they ran out of money for small businesses. And Ayn Rand Institute goes against everything that the Scandinavian model that we love so much, that yes, taxes are a little higher at the end of the year, but during the year, you pay nothing to go to the doctor, to visit the eye doctor, to go to the dentist, to visit the ear doctor. And if you have kids, well, that's a lot of doctor's appointments. Nothing at the point of sale. It's at the end of the year. And most people with kids get money back. So it just gets taken out of that and you get less back than you would have. So it makes sense to want to provide for the people. There would be no U.S. government if there were no U.S. citizens.
True that.
The government they work for us. So she didn't agree, Ayn Rand, at all. And like I said, hold on, I'm not laughing, but she did spend her last days on this planet under government assistance, food assistance, financial assistance, medical assistance. All of it that she shamed everyone for. What?
I'm singing a song.
You're singing a song.
IRONINIC.
Yeah, irony.
Yeah.
Yes, and then there were a few other actual institutes that I just couldn't believe. We're still going through that paperwork. All just started being available. So journalists who care about these things and where, following the money are doing that right now. And so within the weeks to come, we'll find out more and more of why they ran out so fast when it was budgeted towards the small businesses that we actually have. And the Ayn Rand Institute isn't one. The Catholic Church is not one. Walmart, Wendy's, McDonald's, no. Amazon, fuck no. Nope. I don't even know how to spell that, but I mean every syllable of it. Nerp.
Yep. Nerp.
Yeah. So that was it. I know it was more than it was about the same as normal, but not just a topic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
There were just too many.
Russ spelled it out for us down there in the chat. N-E-R-P. Nerp.
Nerp. I
Thanks,
love
Russ.
it. Frustrated.
For Russ.
Love him. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, he's my chat husband boyfriend.
Oh, yeah, he mentioned that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a
All
real
right.
thing. It's getting serious.
Now I'm jealous. What? All right.
Twat did I hear? I must
Twat?
have an ear infection. Let me figure it out. I will never be too mature to understand or love that.
No?
No, I can't.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us another Friday night. We'll be here next Friday night. If you didn't regret this one, come again. That was great. I'm glad we covered so many topics. That was awesome.
Me too. Yeah, I like doing headlines. Maybe I should do, more because there sometimes are too many things to cover, and I want everyone to know everything. We need informed people. Yes, and until I can just take this out of my drive and stick it in your drive for you to know, which isn't available yet.
Yeah. It's not going to be like put in the ear. It's going to be like put in the beehole.
Oh. Yes. It will be called the consent stick.
All right. With that, we love you all. Thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful weekend and stay humanist.
For Godless sake.
Thank you.